I got a power supply from my local Goodwill. They basically recondition used electronics and stuff like that, and you can get these for really cheap. This is about a, let's see here, it's a 380 watt power supply, costing about 15 bucks, and I'm going to use that to power the electrolysis tank. So you can see I've already got the cover off here, and I just want to note a few things about choosing one of these power supplies. So just because the wattage, you don't just always want to go for the max wattage rating. What you want to look at here is there's usually a table on the side like this that tells you the max amperage output for each one of these rails. So you want to look at that. Mostly I'm going to be using the 12 volt rail. So 24 amps should be more than enough for an electrolysis setup, but we'll know for sure when I put the large piece of that vise in there, because that's gonna flow the most current, and we'll see how much it draws then. But it should be more than enough. But yeah, not all power supplies are going to be rated equally. So you can't always just go by the max wattage, because every manufacturer has a different way of determining what that number is, and it's usually not very accurate. I know from my experience with building computers and stuff like that, that Antec power supplies are pretty good quality, meaning that this number is actually kind of depressed. They actually rate this as max load of 360 watts with all these together. But if you have multiple power supplies, in the same range, the best way to choose it is usually just go by weight. It's not very scientific, but just pick the one that weighs more, because usually what you're buying is more heatsink. That's where most of the weight comes from. Just beefier materials. Heavier is better when it comes to power supplies. You don't have to go nuts and get 700, 800, 1,000 watt power supplies. Just something like this is pretty ideal for an electrolysis setup. So just get something cheap like that. So I got the cover off here, and got it plugged into my outlet. Now, something about computer power supplies is they have a switch in the back here, but if you turn it on, there's still not going to be power on here, because you actually have to connect a couple of these wires to tell it that, like on a computer, you press the front of the computer to turn it on. There's a button usually, and what it does is it just trips this switch here between the green and black wire, which is ground, to tell it, hey, I want you to turn on. But the first thing you want to do is just bridge these so that you can start getting power to your connections, and then use a multimeter to actually verify the output of them to make sure they are what they should. All right, so I've got my power, my wires bridged here, and I'm just going to go in the back here, turn the switch on. This fan should start up as soon as I hit this switch. Perfect. That's how you're going to know it's on, is the fan spinning. Make sure you turn it off before you start messing with this. And especially be careful of obvious large capacitors like this and stuff like this, because these will still be charged up. So I need to be careful of those while I'm messing with this stuff. But yeah, I'm going to pull this thing out right here and start cutting some of these zip ties and stuff like that away. Like I said earlier, before I bundle these wires, I'm going to voltage test all of them. And one thing you can do is you can just attach your negative lead to the chassis like this. The ground goes to the chassis anyway, so just plug it into one of the screw holes like this, and you're all set. You can use your other hand, if you're not holding a camera, to just touch the positive lead to the end of your wires like that, and just test them. Pretty easy. And then just bundle them as you get them off. I'm going to keep this one separate, just because, I'm not sure about that one. Next one's the large power connector, so I need to turn this, I need to remove this here. and cut this away. And there we go. Same deal. Going to keep them all together in a bundle until I voltage test them and then put them all together. So now, like I said, this green wire here needs to be connected to one of these black wires, ground basically. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to strip the end of that and then just wrap it around the chassis, and that should allow me to turn the power supply on at will. And should spin up. There we go. Good deal. Here it is, the green wire. That's really all you have to do. I'm going to put a switch on it so that I can turn it on and off easily. But anyway, I'm gonna finish up voltage testing this last bundle of wires here. So we're down to this fan only wire. Now this should actually be 12 volts. Huh, that's odd. Okay, because I think this is actually meant for a chassis fan, for a power, or for a computer power supply fan. It should be 12 volts. Figure out why that's not 12 volts. Oh, got another yellow. Alright, so we're left with a few wires here. White, gray, blue, and purple. I believe white is -5 volts. Yeah, okay, -5. We're not going to need that. Just going to put it aside. I think blue is -12. Yeah, we're not going to need that either. So purple's also 5 volts. This is actually 5 volt standby. I'm going to keep that separate as well. We're not going to throw that in with the rest of the 5 volt wires. And that's it. I'll show you a overview of what I got here. So all the connectors are off. They're all over here. And now I'm going to just separate them out of this rat's nest here and group them nicely in their respective color. Okay, here's where I am now. You can see it's a lot more organized. Everything's a little bit more bundled. Most of these have common terminal connectors, and you can see on the board down here, it shows you what it is: 12 volts, 3.3 volts, ground. I think it says 5 volts in there somewhere, 5 volts. So most of these come off of a common feed, I guess. The only exception to that is this one 12 volt wire. And I'll probably just clip that off just because it's going to be easier to manage in one big block. And then I have my specialty wire separated out over here. You can see they all come off of different connection points here. Okay, so here's what I've got now. The 5 volt and the 3.3 volt, I just wrapped with some electrical tape since I'm not going to use them, and they're just going to hang like this. Not a big deal. The 12 volt, I stripped about an inch off all the strands. There's about 7 of them. Stripped about an inch from the end and then just wrapped them into a clump like that. The ground has a lot more wires, so it's got about 20. I think there's about 20 ground wires, so I wrapped them in 7 wire bundles like this, and then there's the 6 remaining one here, which should still be more than enough. And what I'm going to be able to do is connect each one of these independently to one of the pieces. Alright, so I'm going to finish up the power supply. Made a few modifications that I like. The first of which being I drilled a 15-30 seconds hole in the top here, and the cover sits on there like that. So what I'm going to do is attach this little switch here, like so. It's going to go in there like that, and it's just going to kind of sit in there. Oops. It's going to sit on there like that. So this thing basically kind of sits in this little space here. There's not much space anywhere else. So right here is kind of ideal. It's kind of limited, but I think it's fine. I kind of like the fact that it's on top because I can just easily reach it. Usually when I'm doing the electrolysis or something like that, the power supply is going to be faced whichever direction the wires come out, and the switch is kind of in an awkward position in the back here underneath the power switch. So I am going to go ahead and use that green wire and attach it to this switch, just because it's going to be a lot easier. So that's one thing. I'm just going to attach this green wire, and I'm actually going to split this ground wire here. It's kind of short, so I'm going to need to solder a little bit of extra length on here. The other thing I'm going to do is I have this super bright LED. Where is it? There we go. And I'm just going to put that right here. What I want that to indicate is when I have the 12-volt rail energized. Well, I mean, I guess any rail is going to be energized, but I want to put it just about right there. About right here or so. And the reason is because I already have this 12-volt wire here that I cut short. And yeah, it's just convenient. It's already kind of the correct length, and I can just put it in there very easily. That's the only reason. And like I said, that 12-volt, I'm going to split it. One side's going to go to the LED, and the other side's going to go to the power switch. So the LED should turn on anytime I have power on, and it's just going to be convenient for me to easily see whether the power supply is on or not, without having to read, you know, the labels or anything like that on the switch, or look at the fan or whatever. So that's the plan. I've already got my hole cut, so the switch is pretty much ready to attach. And I want to trim these wires down so that I can remove this lid here. This green wire, you can see, is like really long. So I'm just going to trim it so that it fits into the switch at about that length. That's about how much I need to comfortably pull it off without having too much slack. Maybe even a little bit less. So I'm going to trim that, and then I'm just going to attach that. Well, first I'm actually going to solder this with some extra wire that I have here. Alright, so I'm applying my wire splice right now for the grounding wire. Got them all wrapped up together just like that. And got my soldering iron. And I'm going to apply a nice little drop on the tip here, like this. There we go. Just going to hold it up to there and then apply pressure from the top with my rosin core solder. There we go. Looks like it can't separate anymore, so make all that good. I'm just going to apply some heat shrink over this connection once everything else is where I want it to be, but that looks good. Alright, I got my hole drilled for my LED. It ain't pretty, but it'll do. This mesh stuff keeps wanting to tear, so it's really annoying to drill. So I need to solder the LED to my 12-volt wire. And by the way, the longer lead, you can see that, right? Yeah. The longer lead is the positive, the bottom one is the negative, the shorter one. So just keep that in mind. So I'm going to solder the longer one onto this 12-volt wire here, and then the shorter one onto my black wire. And I'm going to need both hands to do this, so I'll just have to show you the finished product. Almost forgot. Before you do that, make sure you put the heat shrink on, because if you forget it, then you're going to have a solder connection with no way to insulate it. So put your heat shrink on first and solder it like that, and then move it up and heat your heat shrink up. Same thing with the other one. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to note was that this LED, normally you would put a current limiting resistor in line with an LED, but the one I found was already had an integrated resistor, so I don't need to. I can just solder directly to the 12-volt, and I verified that beforehand just by manually plugging it into the 12 volt, and it didn't burn out, so must be fine. If it burns out sometime in the future, I guess we'll know. You do need a current limiting resistor, but in this case, I'm not going to install one, and it seemed to be fine, so there you go. Alright, so the power supply is mostly finished. Got it buttoned back up and everything. It's going to show you how it works. Turn this back power supply on. You notice how it's, like I said, it's kind of difficult to get to, so I installed this. This is the has the green wire to ground attached. So we'll just flip that on. You see the LED too right there. And that's it. It's just easy to get to. I like it. I lost one of the screws, so if I find out later, I'll install it, but otherwise everything's looking good. The other thing I'm going to do is maybe take these alligator connectors off and just put some long extensions on there, because I don't really like them like this. It's kind of difficult to work with. I need it a little bit longer, so I'm going to take these off and just put some longer wire on there. Just going to use these regular wing connectors. Alright, so here it is done. Try the switch one more time. Good to go. And I got my extensions on here. Shut that off real quick. There we go. Just have let's put some 8-gauge wire on here as an extension. It's going to make it a lot easier to clip on and stuff now. And I always have some extras here if I need them. And have some more extension cords that I can just clip onto these, but these I'm just going to leave kind of short because these are going to be my primaries. And yeah, that's it for now. Kind of dirty. Got to clean up now.